Today we're reviewing 1942 on the Nintendo Entertainment System. Originally an arcade game released in Japan in 1984 and North America in 1985, this port made its way to home consoles by late 1985 in Japan and a full year later to North America in 1986. The success of the arcade edition was a great boon for the newly established game studio called Capcom, and of course they wanted to keep their momentum going by making their title available to home markets. The NES edition would sell over 1 million copies worldwide, a massive feat for mid-80s gaming. Great as it was back then, how well does it hold up today? Straight from the title screen, you get right into the action. The player pilots an American Lockheed P-38 Lightning, dubbed the Super Ace. The goal is to survive the onslaught of enemy aircrafts to reach the shores of Japan. The overhead view gives you plenty of room to maneuver and react to enemy movements and shots. The first wave you face keeps a pretty easy pace, and of course gets harder the longer you go through the levels. Most enemy aircrafts will go down in a single shot, however, you too will be defeated in a single shot or if a collision occurs on you. The enemies will start moving in basic patterns, but soon will improve their tactics by making last-minute turns or circling the screen until you shoot them down. There are also bigger enemies that, while moving slower, will take more shots to defeat. You're not left totally alone in your flight though. If you take down a specially colored battalion, they will produce a power-up. Power-ups can range from adding guns to your craft, adding 2 mini-planes to your sides that also shoot, give more lives, more points, or more loop-de-loop attempts. Speaking of the loop-de-loop, this is an additional mechanic that allows the player to dodge all damage for a short period of time when things get a little hairy. You only have limited attempts, so you can't just go spamming this tactic. Honestly though, the animation it plays causes the iframes to activate too late. Very rarely did it ever work out, and honestly you're better off focusing on pure maneuvering to dodge. That said, with all the chaos that can happen on screen, the game felt fair. Lots of opportunity to maneuver safely as long as you keep your wits about you. Any deaths I suffered were, for the most part, just me not being good enough, rarely any bogus defeats. Now, if you started with the arcade version, this one would take some getting used to. It doesn't move nearly as smooth thanks to the low power of the mid-80s home console. When the screen got full, there would be a noticeable slowdown. Likely unintentional, but it certainly gave you an extra bit of time to react, I suppose. For 32 levels, it's all basically the same gameplay, just different waves and formations to have to shoot your way through. It can get tiring, especially since there's not even a little bit of auto-fire time. You have to tap that button for every single shot. Now, if you can't keep your focus for too long, the home console edition did allow you to continue a new game from the beginning of the last level you were on, as long as you don't turn off your NES. Great for completionists, terrible for your electricity bill. Gameplay of 1942 gets a 6 out of 10. So, it's not going to be fair to compare the graphics fidelity between a Nintendo and an arcade cabinet at the time, but such is the curse of a port. The graphics were fine. They work and portray what they need to. The action is so fast-paced anyways that you're not even going to care about how smooth the shading is on a plane. The movement choppiness does play a bit on the eye though. It doesn't feel great, and I'm not asking it to be of arcade quality, but even getting used to it for gameplay purposes, it still felt off. As for the backgrounds, well, this is based on the Battle of Midway, which took place over the Pacific Ocean, so a big sheet of blue water is going to be your key environment most of the time. You will, however, come across some islands along the way, which are nice to break up the monotony of blue, but unfortunately, a lot of the green plains were a near similar color to the grass of the islands, making it really hard to track the enemy. Now, it's not totally impossible, but I have yet to determine if this was a mistake or a purposeful obstacle. The graphics of this game get a 5 out of 10. So you probably noticed that I have not been playing an in-game song through this review thus far. Allow me to show you why. Say hello to the NES version of the stage music. So yeah, the arcade version was super bare bones as it was, but bringing it to the NES did not translate well at all. Getting masked by all the sound effects, you would swear there was no music at all, or maybe you thought your speakers were broken. The thing is too, We've heard better music on the NES at this point in the console's life cycle. I don't believe for a second that the hardware couldn't handle a new track or better translation of the original. As for the sound effects, it's basically the same thing. Your gunfire sounds rough, and that's not great considering you'll be hearing it a lot. Once again, I know there could have been a better choice for sound here. The music and sound of 1942 gets a 1 out of 10. Of course, this game made its way into every single arcade and doctor's office back in the day, so it's rare that anybody didn't at least see this game. As for the NES version, I had a few rounds while visiting cousins' homes and parties. It was actually a pretty good game to be able to trade off turns with, even better with the 2-player mode. But as with kids, it soon got tiring and we'd just move on to other things. The nostalgia hit gets a 3 out of 10. Bringing the successful arcade classic to a home console was no easy feat back then, but in the end, even though it wasn't visually or audibly close to the original, the gameplay was still there, and that's what was most important. It won't take you long to decide if this game is for you after a few rounds. You're not missing too much if you decide you don't want to bother, but if you decide to stick with it, you may end up enjoying it.